Alright, hey, what's up? It's me, Zachu. We are back with the third episode of the team building video. Today we're talking about balance. I think balance tends to be the most, beginner-friendly team comp. This is all spoilers. I thought I was recording the video, and then I wasn't. I looked down, and it wasn't recording, so I'm like, well, that's fun. So I have all this already pre-done. So anyways, balanced teams, they tend to be the most, they tend to be the most flexible of the team comps that we've talked about, like between hyper offense, balance, and bulky offense. Balance is the most flexible, it's the most beginner friendly, it's the easiest to build. You tend to be able to make a lot more Pokemon work than like hyper offense or bulky offense teams. And like part of the reason it's so flexible is because it can be brought into any matchup. Like against hyper offense, it has a good matchup into. Against other balance, it has decent matchups into, and then against other against bulky offense, you have a good solid matchup into, and then even against like weather teams, you have like the tools to make it a pretty decent matchup, right? And so obviously now none of this is going to be, because balance is so flexible. None of what I say is going to be very like set in stone and hard, like a hard rule for balance teams, just because again the way the teams are constructed, right? When I build now, the generic starting point for balance. Sorry, my mouse has been so weird. The generic like rule for balance that I tend to follow, at least from a starting point, is a 3-3 offensive support, right? So 3 offensive mons, 3 support mons, and in general that looks like, and not necessarily in this order, but in general it looks like you have one like Pokemon that can do some standalone damage, something that doesn't necessarily need like outside support. It's just capable of very strong burst damage that can put your opponent under a lot of like offensive pressure right off the bat, right? In balance teams, like offensive pressure and momentum is a lot. You don't really want to be in a position where you have to like make a defensive switch and kill off a bunch of your momentum and positioning, right? The other two things is Pokemon that don't necessarily do crazy damage, but they have like decent damage that can hold their own, and oftentimes have the ability to set up or do something besides setup that are beneficial to the team, right? I'm thinking like things like Ledge and Sylveon like perfectly fit this role. They don't do amazing damage just by themselves. However, they can set up and they can do other things outside of just damage that tend to make them useful, right? And they tend to be able to invest in bulk rather than have to invest in like attacking stat and speed. The next thing this balance team usually have is like a Tailwind user or a speed control user if you're not really into using Tailwind on the team. A lot of the times, like I tend to put a Trick Room user on the team as well. If I pull up into a match and I see that my opponent has like Tailwind and really fast mons, I will just click Trick Room. This works especially because your Trick Room attackers tend to be fairly bulky and are able to get it up more times than not. And the last part is just like a general support Pokemon. And again, none of this is a hard and fast rule. A lot of the times you can condense these rules. Like maybe one of your that was weird. One of your solid damage users can also maybe run Tailwind, and that frees up another support slot. Or maybe one of your damage dealers can also run Trick Room, and that frees up your Trick Room slot for another support Pokemon. Or maybe like your Trick Room and your support Pokemon run the same thing. Or your Tailwind and your general support Pokemon run the same thing. Like, there's options, right? A perfect example of like an offensive Pokemon that can set Tailwind is Hydreigon. An offensive Pokemon that can set Trick Room is like Armarouge. So like you have options, right? So that being said, I forgot a word here actually. So yeah, in general, balance teams tend to play mons that work well in both Trick Room or Tailwind, which means that 60 to 90 base speed range is great, right? I talk about this a lot in the VGC Pokemon breakdown guides about like speed tiers, right? And how like base 100 is fast, base 50 is slow, and then like anything in between that. So anything in that like I said, the 60 to 90 range, like trying to find a Pokemon that's actually base 60 that I could see myself using. So something like Magnezone is 60 base speed. It has the speed to kind of work pretty well in Trick Room. Like you have 80 base and you can move it up to 100 speed. You're still going to be slower than most things. You're still going to be slower than most offensive Pokemon, but you're still going to also be faster than most things if you set up Tailwind, right? Or Pokemon at like the 90 base range. At 110 base speed, you're still faster than pretty much, like, you invest very little into speed here. You're now faster than everything, barring Choice Scarf users under Tailwind, and you're still slower than a lot of the really fast offensive mons if you decide to set up Trick Room, right? So that 60 to 90 range is all really great. I think like the ideal range is 75. Don't use Delibird, this is just the first 75 Pokemon that I saw. 75 puts you at 95 base speed with 107. So with very little investment into your speed, you are now faster than everything in the field, barring Choice Scarf users under Tailwinds, but you're still slower than all the offensive Pokemon, right? And then because like I run Trick Room on my balanced teams, you can prevent your opponent from setting up Trick Room. So even though your mons are built somewhat fast, they're not ultra speedy, right? Now, generally the order that I tend to look at this is like the order that I pick my mons is, first of all, like first I look for my standalone attacker, then I look for my speed control user, usually my fast speed control user, and then I pick my 2 other damage dealing mons to finish out that offensive core. And then I tend to pick my general support and then the Trick Room user, right? Because the 6 slots should really just be the glue that holds the team together. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Trick Room user, it can just be a general secondary support Pokemon, right? Now, part of the reason that balanced teams tend to do so well is because they're very defensively oriented, right? They tend to focus a lot on like damage reduction and just being able to withstand like attacks for a long period of time. This is especially strong on a Dynamax metagame where like your defensively oriented balanced teams could just stall an opponent's Dynamax. In this game it's a little bit different, obviously because there is no Dynamax and you can't stall out a Terra. However, because of this focus on like because of this defensively oriented focus on team building, it allows you to tank a lot of hits that you like. It basically allows you to be a thorn in your opponent's side because they can't actually KO you. And it makes your opponent have to switch around a lot because you're either constantly lowering their stats or constantly putting them out of position. And because of this, like things like Intimidates, dual screens, so Light Screen and Reflect, Parting Shot, and like status such as Will-O-Wisp and Paralysis and Sleep tend to be very good on balanced teams, right? So it's very common to see like in past gens, it's very common to see like Intimidate users and Screens users on these balanced teams, as well as like something that can put you to sleep. I think the perfect example of like, I think the very pinnacle of balanced teams would be Rinja Sun from last generation. You obviously have like your Charizard, your Groudon, and your Zacian for your damage dealers, your standalone, like your damage and speed control, or like your speed control and other damage were like roll compressed into Charizard specifically on that team, but that was fine. And then as far as your other, like your support Pokemon had Instant, Grimmsnarl, and Gastrodon, and Grimmsnarl also provided like your general support plus speed control. Gastrodon was general support, Instant was general support plus positioning support, right? So that being said, like Rinja Sun from last generation may have been like the pinnacle of balanced teams as we've seen them. So if we go through my list of like, we're gonna copy this. Yeah, I'm gonna copy these and then we're gonna use this kind of format to make a team, right? So I think for this as well, I'm going to just do like, we'll figure this out as we go, right? So the first Pokemon I want to talk about for like standalone damage, right? Sorry, 1 second. Mouth is dry. So the first Pokemon for like standalone damage, and one of the things I want to iterate is you don't have to use the same like top 10 Pokemon. I'm not trying to say that the top 10 Pokemon are the only Pokemon that you can use. However, the first Pokemon I think of when I think of standalone damage is Hydreigon, right? This Pokemon, because of its coverage, can come to pretty much every matchup. It can come to pretty much every matchup, and it has really good damage, right? Like 125 base special attack and 90 base speed means you are fast, relatively. And you hit pretty hard, and then you put a Life Orb on that, and you hit even harder, right? So like my generic Hydreigon set, I think for this team we're going to do Protect, we're going to do Draco Meteor, and we're going to do Dark Pulse for now. And then we can pick the coverage move once we figure out what the rest of the team looks like. The reason that I do the coverage move like last is because a lot of times like I used to find myself in the trap of, hey, I have this coverage move on this Pokemon already, so I don't necessarily need this Pokemon of this type. even though it may have like in the end been the glue that held the team together, right? So we'll leave that for now. Now next thing we look at is like a tailwind / speed control, right? And so you have a lot of options you can use for speed control. Obviously you have tailwind users. We've talked about our tailwind users. The other thing is like electro web users. Like I've used fast electro web users as my speed control in the past. However, the Pokemon that get electro web right now kind of suck. You get Ampharos and you get Magnezone, and neither of those Pokemon are fast enough to make electro web necessarily worthwhile, because you would always have to like tank a hit and protect the Pokemon beside you in order to make it worth anything. The other option is Bulldoze, which has some decent users, like nothing amazingly fast, like Choice Scarf, Bulldoze, and Dialib can be a thing, or actually I don't know if Charizard is actually usable in this format. Like I don't know if it's legal. I know it's in the game. I don't know if it's legal. Like and there's certain Bulldoze Pokemon that you just wouldn't use, like Dugtrio, but you can get away with like Bulldoze Garchomp for speed control. The Garchomp you would technically use more for damage than you would for speed control. I'm just looking at this point for like Pokemon that actually get Bulldoze and what could actually be like viable Bulldoze users. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of great ones. Like the other option obviously is Icy Wind, which I think has a lot more viability. Just because the users tend to be better. Like this is what I'm saying. Well, I don't think Charizard is usable because this Chien-Pao still shows up. We can't use Chien-Pao. But a good Icy Wind user that comes to mind right off the bat for me, like Gardevoir tends to be a really good Icy Wind user. I've used Scarf Icy Wind Gardevoir in the past. I've used like Gengar for Icy Wind in the past. So there's a lot more flexibility on the Icy Wind users than there are like other means of speed control, right? However, I think for the general purpose of the video, we're just going to use Tailwind, right? And again, there's a lot of Tailwind Pokemon that come to mind. For consistency's sake, we're going to pick Murkrow, just because it's consistent, it's good, and it will always have, like in the current metagame, because it's so setup oriented, Murkrow will always have a place. So we'll recycle the same Murkrow set from yesterday. So Tailwind, Taunt to stop like setup or disruption. Haze to stop like first of all your own Hydreigon special attack drops from Draco Meteor as well as the opponent from setting up, and then Foul Play because Murkrow doesn't do damage. I actually don't remember the EV spread from yesterday either, so I'm gonna pull one out of the hat. Cool, we'll pull that one out of the hat. So the next Pokemon that I want to talk about, so standalone is Hydreigon. Speed control Murkrow. Also, keep in mind, I may have said this already, or I may have said this in the time it wasn't recording, but a lot of these rules, like the standalone 2 damage, Tailwind, Trick Room, general support, while this is a very generic process, it is not the only process to be used for balance. Like, you don't have to follow this format. This is why balance is the most flexible, because you can pretty much throw any Pokemon on there that you want to, right? So, next let's pick another, we'll pick another generic Pokemon that can do damage. Sorry, I have a direction I want to go with this already. I'm trying to reformat this in a way that it works in my head, right? So next we're gonna just pick a Pokemon that does just generic damage, right? And we're gonna pick Armourouge for this because Armourouge fits that strong damage, 125 base special attack. Without a Life Orb, you don't necessarily do as much damage. Also, we're gonna change Hydreigon's Terra type later. This thing's Terra Dark. It doesn't really matter. This thing, I'm gonna say Armourouge is going to go Terra Grass. Like Armourouge and Cerulege going Terra Grass tends to be very strong. You could also actually go Terra Psychic, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm also using Flash Fire for this. Weak Armor is like okay, but under Trick Room it doesn't work because yeah. So we'll say Flash Fire. We'll use Terra Psychic, but this goes to that 75 base speed that I was talking about with like. Unfortunately, Delibird was the Pokemon. Was this thing really at the top the entire time? Alright, so skip over the fact that I didn't see this and then scrolled and then the first thing I saw was Delibird. I'm tired. So, Armourouge, it hits at 75 base where it's like, so we see like 95 stat, which means it is, like next to Tailwind users, it's very fast. Next to Trick Room users, in a matchup against Tailwind, it's also very slow, right? As for the item, I actually don't know what item people run on this thing. I genuinely have no idea. I've never used this Pokemon. But for the moves, we're going to put, let's get Wide Guard. We're going to put Wide Guard on here. Wide Guard has a lot of utility in the current metagame, just because like, Let's think about this. Like Hydreigon Heat Wave, there's Garchomp Earthquake, there's Hyper Voice, there's Make It Rain. So Wide Guard has a lot of utility into the current metagame. The other thing to talk about is like Armarouge has a pretty okay matchup. Like if you run like not Terra, as long as you're running non-Terra Psychic Armarouge, it has a good matchup into Goldango, right? Because Goldango's stabs obviously are Make It Rain and Shadow Ball. As a fire type, you resist Shadow Ball, and if you Terra into something that's not a fire type, or if you Terra into something like, you can eliminate both weaknesses by Terra into something that, by going Terra into something that is not Psychic. Realistically, I don't think there's a type that resists both. However, you could Terra into like, I know like on Armarouge and Ceruledge both, like Terra Grass is very good because, you know, you eliminate like Grass's biggest weakness of fire while also having a defense, like a nice Terra type, because the idea is you're going to hit this fire type with like a water type move or a ground type move, and then there's a Terra Grass, it's now like half effective, right? So the next move that I'm going to put on Armarouge is like Expanding Force, right? We'll get to that in a minute, and then I think it's like Armor Cannon is its signature move. Yeah, Armor Cannon for its signature move, and then you can pick. I'm actually going to go with, what moves does this thing get? I've never used this Pokemon. I don't know what it does, but I know it's what I wanted to use for this team because it's like I said, the pinnacle. Where is it? Did it pass it? Oh, it's right here. Oh yeah, that's right. The last thing we're gonna put on this Pokemon is Trick Room. So now this Pokemon, like I said, roll compression is the thing. I think that's what they call it. It acts as your Trick Room user, which means that your other damage, it now becomes other damage / Trick Room, which means that you can more, like you can deal with the next slot to like a secondary support user, right? Now, I don't actually, yeah, we'll call it, I don't want to call it that. How fast is, actually, no, this kind of works out. Because what, Garchomp is 169 stat, right? So even with this set, with a minus speed nature but 31 speed IVs, you're actually slow enough to be like slow, but under Tailwind, you are fast enough to outspeed Garchomp. That's kind of cool, actually. That was unplanned. That was 100% unplanned. Also, again, I don't know what item these things run. I genuinely don't know what item this thing runs. And this doesn't have item data yet, so I'll figure out an item for this later. So next Pokemon, obviously since we're using Expanding Force, we need a Psychic Terrain Setter. Enter Indeedee. Oh, I don't know why I'm doing that. So enter Indeedee. Indeedee is a Pokemon I really like. It's a support Pokemon. It with Psychic Terrain, you prevent priority. With Protect, Follow Me, and Helping Hand, you have a really great supportive moveset, and then a fourth move of your choice. I still think Safety Goggles is a really great. A DD set allows you to redirect spores without having to care. And then again, just the generic Protect in order because I'm OCD about that. Helping Hand and a Hyper Voice. And Terra Normal because I can. Again, I'm just recycling the same DD set from yesterday. I'm just recycling the same DD set I can yesterday. As the format like advances and people like the metagame starts to stabilize, reusing the same sets over and over again isn't necessarily like the most optimal thing. It's a trap that I found myself falling into a lot in 2021. Making a new set for a team that has weaknesses to different things tends to be a good idea. But so for general support, we have Indeedee. So the next thing we want is like another damage dealing Pokemon, right? Because Hydreigon does damage, Armarouge does damage, Murkrow and Indeedee do not do damage. I still don't know what item to put on like Armarouge. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. So the next thing we want is like another damage dealer, right? Obviously running like force support to offense is something that is very hard to pull off because you're bringing the same two offensive Pokemon into every matchup. So next you want like some sort of strong physical attacker with like a mid speed tier, right? So maybe one of the first things that comes to mind, something that could work maybe is like King Gambit. However, not now. We already have two dark types on our team, and running a third dark type isn't necessarily the greatest option. Yes, it's a dark type that doesn't necessarily share weaknesses, and if you're not going like, as long as you're not going Terra Dark Hydreigon, you don't technically share a weakness to fighting as well. However, we're gonna go from here. I'm actually just going to use this as well. I actually generally don't know what I want to use for that slot. Okay. Again, I build these teams on the fly. I do things that I think will look good on the spot that aren't necessarily going to be great in the long run. Let's do it with speed, actually. Find a Pokemon around like the 80 base speed range. Just because I think getting that 80 base speed range can maybe work very well. Ideally, a physical attacker in that 80 range as well. Like, Gyarados could technically work because it has the ability to set up in Dragon Dance, but it can also function under Trick Room, right? You know what? Let's do Gyarados. Does that work on the team, though? Part of the thing is, like, just trying to find ones that work, right? What are Armor's common partners? Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah, that really doesn't surprise me. But anyways. Sorry, I'm actually very lost. I haven't played around with Armories a lot in this format, so... Yeah, we'll go the Gyarados route. Gyarados will make it Terra Ground as well, to kind of mitigate your... What is it? To mitigate your electric weakness. There we go. As far as Gyarados' item, I'm going to put Lumberry on it. Yeah, Lumberry, we're going to use Intimidate as well. I think Intimidate is really great supportive. We'll put Dragon Dance on this, and then we'll put Waterfall. Does it get Earthquake? It does get Earthquake, so we'll put Earthquake on this as well. Because everything else in this team, fun interaction actually, Wide Guard will protect Armarouge, like, in a Armarouge Gyarados, like, side by side. Wide Guard will protect the Armarouge from Gyarados' damage, and your Murkrow is unaffected, your Hydreigon is unaffected, your DD has Protect, so you can always you can Earthquake pretty safely with this Pokemon. And then for the last move slot, like, they actually took Power Whip away from this thing, which is kind of sad. But I'm just gonna throw Protect on here for the sake of it. You can swap Protect off for a different item. As far as its stats go, you don't necessarily need max speed. Well, like I said Garchomp hit 169, so hold on, I'm gonna pull up the calculator with us. Shit. Sorry. There it is. So 113 speed, I think. No, 114. Has to be 114. Hey, look at that. So 114 speed after one Dragon Dance will allow you to outspeed Garchomp. However, under Trick Room, you are also still faster, which allows you just to vest the rest of this into bulk. So like that's a potential Gyarados set that you could run. You have, with 125 base attack and a Lumberry, like you have the ability to stand alone and do damage, but also have the ability to set up and do even more damage. And again, with this speed stat, you're faster than most things that you want to outspeed under Trick Room and Tailwind. Like in Tailwind, you're fast enough to outspeed everything you need to outspeed. After Dragon Dance, you outspeed most things you need to outspeed. Under Trick Room, you're also slower than most of the fast offensive Pokemon. The last thing we want is like I said, like one last like support Pokemon, right? So we'll throw here, we'll throw other damage as Gyarados. The last secondary support Pokemon is going to be Grimmsnarl. I had already made up my mind that Grimmsnarl was going to be on this team when I thought about doing the video. So the last Pokemon I have is Grimmsnarl, and we're going to use Light Play Grimmsnarl with Prankster and Spirit Break. You can use Fake Out over Spirit Break if you want to. I like Spirit Break because it's something you can just spam. Parting Shot, Light Screen, Reflect. I know a lot of people have been running like Misty Terrain in the slot since you have Spirit Break, but this is the Grimmsnarl set that I like. I don't remember the EVs that I used on this thing. It was like something like this is what I might have been using in the past. I don't actually remember. Do I have a Grimmsnarl set sitting around? I do. Oh, this is the Grimmsnarl set I used. There we go. I'm going to be honest, this is recycled from something I was using in 2022, but it still works, right? Because again, at this point in time, EVs, while they are important, they aren't as important because the metagame is still weird, and EVs are something you can tweak as you go. I still don't have an item for Armarouge. I genuinely don't know. Oh well. yeah, I don't know what to put on this Pokemon. I would put Life Orb on it, but we have that on Hydreigon. So that's kind of, again, that's just my general approach to building a balanced team. Like I said, my damage Pokemon that can stand alone, my speed control, my secondary damage, and a Trick Room setter, my general support number 2 or general support number 1, another damage dealer that can set up while standing alone, and then a general support Pokemon number 3. Like I said, these rules are not hard and fast. You can also still technically build that. You can still build balanced teams that are like 4 offense, 2 support, but 3-3 is the most flexible. If you're building a balanced team and using the 3-3 rule, and you find that you're just lacking damage in general, you can always just kill a support Pokemon for something with more damage. Or if you find that like you have 2 offensive Pokemon that are capable of handling every threat in the game, you can, it's very risky, but you can drop a damage dealer and add a support Pokemon. So yeah, that's what, like, balanced teams, they're very flexible, they're very strong actually. So that's kind of what happened here. Anyways, that's kind of my take to balance. That was weird. So yeah, that's just my take on balanced teams. Again, like 3 offensive Pokemon, usually 2 special, 1 physical is what I go for, and then 3 support Pokemon, like Tailwind, general support, or Tailwind, like general support and Trick Room setter, but we have Trick Room setter on an attacker. So that's all I got. I've been Zachu. I upload Pokemon Scarlet and Violet content every single day, outside forces notwithstanding. If you've made it this far into the video, I really appreciate the support, and I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm well on my way to 100 subs. I think I'm almost there. Like, I checked this morning and I was at 78, I think. So yeah, I'm really close. I appreciate all the support so far and all the growth I've seen in the month or so that I've been posting videos. Let me know, like, what do I want you to let me know? Oh, let me know if, like, you would find yourself maybe being, like, what would you, Jeez, I'm struggling here. Hold on. Sorry. Let me know in the future, like, if you'd want to see videos built around specific Pokemon, because that's certainly something that I'm capable of doing. I've done it in the past. And I actually find it very fun to build entire teams, like, centered around making one specific Pokemon succeed. So, yeah. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, and make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good rest of your day, night, or evening, whenever you're watching this from, and peace. Oh, it didn't stop. Hold on.